Welcome, everybody, to the next episode of the Cannabis Review. I'm delighted to be joined in this episode by Dr. Rob O'Brien, who's the CEO and CSO at Supra Research and Development in Canada. How are you keeping today, Rob?
Good. It's a beautiful day here. It's the morning here. It's a little brisk, but it's nice.
I'm delighted to have you on. I've been reading all your latest publishings based on the testing and research that you guys have been doing at Supra. Do you maybe want to give everybody just a quick little overview in 30 seconds or a minute how Supra came to be and your work so far in the industry?
Yeah, for sure. I like to say I'm a reformed academic. I was a university professor for a number of years, and we spun out a company, Supra Research and Development. Over time, we ended up getting into the lab testing base and then started getting the proper licenses to test for cannabis. At which time there was a lot of companies that wanted to, that was pre-legalization. So they thought that by having our license in their portfolio, they'd have a quicker path to legalization. So we were eventually purchased by Valens Growworks, became the Valens company. And after a year or so there, I spun back to my main Supra Research and Development. We not only do cannabis products, but we also do other natural health products and contract research work as well.
Okay, very interesting. So wealth of experience. First question is the ISO IEC 17025 accreditation that you guys has. Is that the license to specifically test and work with cannabis?
No, ISO 17025 is an international standard out of the International Standards Association out of Europe, actually, France, I think. And it is a standard for any testing lab. It's basically a guideline to your quality manual, how you validate methods. And part of that means that you have periodically people come on site, go through your data with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that you're collecting things appropriately. It doesn't prevent labs from cheating, but there's a lot more oversight. And for consumers of the lab services, they can trust that the lab is ISO 17025 accredited, that they are capable of doing the work.
Okay, very good. The first topic I wanted to jump onto was the latest research on THC levels. There's been a lot of conversation, as I'm sure you know, in the industry about there's no need for high THC, whereas some manufacturers seem to think that high THC is the unique selling point for them. What is the latest research that you guys have been conducting on testing THC levels?
Well, we got to be careful with this because my personal opinion is high THC isn't everything. It clearly isn't. But in Canada, when they brought the legislation in to legalize cannabis, the only thing that they allowed on the label were the THC and CBD values, because the last thing they wanted is to attract youth to that. So they didn't want to have appealing marketing that would do that. So the consumers then had only one thing to take a look at, and that was the THC content versus the price. And then over time, we've seen a steady increase in THC values from the products. We've even recently tested products that were legitimately over 30% THC. So this, as this has happened, it's gone up. And at the same time, our legal system has provincial purchasing governments buying the material from the producers, and they've set thresholds for THC purpose as quality higher and higher. So right now, if you don't have a product that's 27%, you're not considered a prime quality product. That's absolutely ridiculous. However, our focus is not even talking about that. Is if you put something on a label, we expect that you have within, let's say, 20% or 10% of that, the correct amount there.
Okay, and can you tell me, is the testing for the THC levels being done just as drying and cultivation is finished, or is it after it's been put through certain machinery that we're losing trichomes along the way?
Yeah, this is part of the problem here, my friend. It's what's happening is that Health Canada is requiring a certificate of analysis or a COA from each batch, and they need things on contaminants like pesticides, metals, etc. But they also need one on the content of the cannabinoids. And the issue with that is that there's a high variance between buds within a plant, and then we have a whole lot across the plant. And then as these buds are going through the processing and mechanical handling, you can lose trichomes, which reduces the THC content. So if you use a COA from the harvest that is pristine material, and maybe you're leaning on the scale a little bit by selecting just the top buds and maybe destemming them or something like that, you'll end up with a very high COA, which gets you a sale. But if you use that on all your package labels, particularly the small buds, the 1 gram packages, which have typically 3 or 4 buds in it, these buds are 30% or so less than the biggest buds, and that's kind of what we expect is happening. But it's an inappropriate use of a testing protocol. So with testing, we need to be fit for purpose. So testing of one test in a lot does not really reflect on what is in the packages, and it's in the packages that the consumer needs to be concerned about.
Okay, so you've got obviously producers and manufacturers looking to test as much as the government are doing their own tests, and one wants to test at one stage where it's at its premium, and the actual test that matters is what's in the package when it goes onto the shelves.
Yeah, well, let's be clear. The responsibility for testing is into the quality assurance person of the producer. They're the ones that are responsible for verifying the lab can do accurate results, and they're responsible for the numbers that go on to the final label. The government has been doing some spot testing, as I understand it, but they haven't been publicly disclosing things. So the only way we're getting this out there is when a group like myself is doing this type of study and just pulling the sheet back and seeing what's underneath it.
Okay, so you guys at Supra basically work on higher quality and safer products for big brands. Is there a specific territory in Canada that you think has the highest quality and the safest products? And if so, is it applicable to America for the same?
Let's sort of step back with that answer. This inflation of the THC values is uniquely a North American problem. And it's because the higher THC labeled products sell more and sell for more money. It is simply that. Now, when we did our tests, we looked at the BC cannabis source. So it's only one part of each province in Canada has its own purchasing agents and that. So we can't speak for Unified. But 93% of the products we tested were more than 15% on a label. 87% were more than 20%. And we even had 26% that were more than 40% below the label claim. Nothing met the label claim. And in a normal sort of study, you would expect that a plus or minus should be above and below. That's what you would expect from normal statistics. But we're not seeing that here. I think that a lot of them producers, and let's not be wrong here. BC Bud, even before legalization, has been regarded as some of the highest quality product in the world. And I believe that is true. But there's just this push that the only way they can get their product sold is to have these higher elevated values, that they're doing what they can to get those numbers. And at the end of the day, the consumers are making decisions on the THC value, which is not correct, but that's the only information they have to go from. And they're picking product A over product B by the number, and it could be maybe product B is a lot higher, but they're more honest. So that's why we really have to do this. I think there's a lot of producers in Canada who are fundamentally honest, but they're using the wrong thing here. And when it gets to Health Canada and others, they're saying, well, the testing labs, I guess we can't do it, which is just complete bullshit. Because there is AOAC, ASTM, NIST in the US, national research that have standards, methods available for people to use. Any lab that wants to do it right can, but the problem is that if the lab gets a biased sample, they have to report that. That's not their fault. But some labs are also, on their part, tweaking up the numbers because that's how they get business. And the other thing that's happening in Canada is the cultivators can't sell directly, the person that cultivates, so they sell to producers. Producers collect from a lot of cultivators, and they're requiring them to use specific labs. So when you do this gives the processors undue influence over the labs, and those labs that get the highest values are the ones that are getting the most business. So that's all part of the problem. But I'm completely committed to make sure this stops. But right now, it's primarily a North American problem.
And the testing protocols that everybody uses, are these the exact same set of rules, or as you said, are people bending and maneuvering themselves to be able to get around certain rules to have certain levels of THC written down?
Well, let's be clear, with ISO 17025, which is not a requirement for the labs in Canada, so some don't even have that, but they don't specify a specific method. So this is allowing for, if you have a better method, then you can do that as long as you do a proper validation and then do regular proficiency testing programs, or maybe test against the CRM, so to make sure that you can get accurate values. So we have a method that is 6.5 minutes. We separate 17 cannabinoids, and it's a run to run 8 minutes. If we use what's published in some of the pharmacopoeias, the method there is 25 minutes. So it doesn't fit for the practical sense. But our method does have us hit the proficiency testing values very well.
Very interesting. You had worked before on commercializing biomass extraction, so would know a fair bit about this. When it comes to Europe and let's say the medical products that created, it's a lot more pharmaceutical over here. Do you think synthetic, biosynthetic, or extracted molecules directly from the plant, which one is the more suitable ingredient for a pharmaceutical product?
Well, look, a premise of chemistry is if the molecule is identical, then it's the same, regardless if your aspirin's made synthetically or extracted from the willow tree. The difficulty with natural products is there's also other things that are co-extracted. So if you look at a pure THC product, it's very difficult not to have trace levels of CBD in it, just because that's the way the world works, right? That's not a bad thing for medicinal products. But I don't think in the medicinal legalization markets that you have in Europe that there's the same type of problem, because there's a European pharmacopoeia and they require label claims to be within 10% of the label. And we haven't heard any reports that those products are a problem. Ironically, a lot of the products worldwide now are exported from Canada, imported from Canada, because we have a legal base here. So ironically, when they land in Ireland and Germany, we can get the labels right, but here in North America we have this issue. So that's complete bogus, right? I suspect that medicinal patients in Europe who are Brien product, maybe even sourced from Canada, are getting good product. And I should add too, there's a big difference between a product that includes buds, because there's a natural variation between buds, and one that has been extracted and put into a gummy or another form that's more medicinal. Then you would expect even a tighter tolerance on that, because you've homogenized the material prior to making the product.
Do you still think there's a lot of room in the blends and formulations of cannabinoids and terpenes and flavonoids to create new novel, let's say, ingredients, shall we call them, for a various of different products and elements?
Yeah, well, in a bit, I think there's some products we're moving. Initially, we had cannabis 1.0, then cannabis 2.0, which is more the finished products, but we're going to get to more medicinal products. My personal feeling is things like sublinguals are much more reasonable than other things, because we also need to dig into the understanding of the pharmacology of these materials. So when you smoke a material or use a vaporizer at low temperature, which is what I recommend, the neutrals are the compounds that get into your bloodstream and get to your brain quite quickly. When you ingest it, you end up having metabolites that are formed, and these can have different, much more variable effect on individuals. So for instance, if I eat an edible that has THC in it, I'm in a tunnel for 4 hours and I'm not really that happy about it. The other piece is that if sublingual, again, is more the neutral into the system. So we really need more research on the pharmacology and how that works, and then develop the appropriate response to that. So there's things like the entourage effect that people talk a lot about, and then you would need a whole extract to get those terpenes. But the other thing people affect, like if you smoke that product, or if you heat it in a vaporizer at a very high temperature, you're not only getting those products converted, you're also getting a lot of degradation products based on temperature. So for instance, if you even vaporize a THC product at a high temperature, the THC degrades to CBN. And we need to keep in mind these types of things. So with the vaporizers, as long as the temperature needs to be below 200 Celsius, we like to even target 180. Otherwise, you get degradation products, and that can lead to both health impact, negative health impacts, and related things.
Very interesting. It's been amazing talking to you, Rob. I hope we can get to basically touch base before the end of this year and get a recap on all the new testing that you guys have done. But for now, thank you very much for joining us. For anybody who wants to learn more about Supra R&D, website is below. I highly recommend checking it out. It's very informative indeed. So, Rob, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Till next episode, everybody.